Thanks
Sounds good?
everyone for tuning in. We are doing Patreon Q&A number 6, in which our patrons submit some questions and we answer them. We answer questions relating to esports health, wellness, and performance. And this week we're going to do something a little different because we've been getting a lot of questions relating to pain along the backside of your forearm, along the backside of your hand here too. And because of that, we wanted to go over this in a little more depth and help you guys understand what's going on, why it's happening, and then definitely what you guys can do to help address the issue that is fox fingers. So, why don't we, to start with, Kate, maybe you can tell us a little more about what fox fingers is.
Sure. We call it fox fingers because the first time we noticed this pain pattern, we mostly noticed it in melee players, especially folks who main fox, folks who main falco. That's not to say this isn't a pain pattern we can't see in PC players or folks who play other games. It's just that we first noticed it in melee, which means that's the first thing we named it after. But we've definitely seen this in folks in mouse hand stuff as well.
Yeah.
The common denominator there with Fox players and with PC stuff is any game that's requiring a high APM, high inputs, quick inputs, more inputs over time as a result. Those are the kinds of folks who are at risk for something going on back here pain wise.
Exactly.
We'd classify this as a tendinopathy because the thing that's being impacted is most of the tendons that cross the back of your hand. So it's not so much that you got pain in the muscle bellies that they're coming from, it's more that you've got pain down here where those tendons insert into the hands and act on the fingers. Tendinopathy means a pathology problem happening to a tendon. You might hear people call it a tendinitis. Tendinitis is not technically correct because itis means inflammation and you don't have to have inflammation to have this problem. That's my big, I soapbox about that. But the specific muscles that are affected here are your extensor indicis, which extends this finger, your index finger, and your extensor digitorum, which extends the other fingers. So what then? Let's see. Trying to figure out where I want to go with this next. I think next best place to go with this is tell us a little bit about what kind of things are people going to see besides pain? Because the achy or sharp pain back here, that part's pretty obvious. But what kind of issues are people going to see with their gameplay? How's it going to impact them?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think there's a few things, and this is actually something I worked with a Fortnite player on. But a lot of the times when you're dealing with tendinopathy, you actually have issues controlling your fingers. So they feel like you're not able to move them as quickly. And then as a result too, they fatigue a little more quickly. So you can't play as long as you want. You can't play as long as you want to, or you can't.
I mean, can any of us ever play as long as we want to?
Exactly. You can't complete maybe the session or the scrim block or whatever that you're
Right.
planning to take, because the tendon is limiting you. And that's a big issue for a lot of us because, hey, we need to practice or we need to do specific things or specific tech training in order to get better. And especially with Genesis coming out, right, we're playing a lot more, probably higher volume, and we want to make sure that we're able to actually play. And when tendon issues come along, it's really easy for us to not be able to have the capacity to do that. And just as an overall review, right, the main reason why this happens is we are causing too much stress on our tendons, and that's leading to our tendons becoming irritated, becoming weaker, and then leading to those coordination issues. And one of the main causes of that is that we don't have the capacity or endurance to handle all of those actions per minute of Fox going like this. And I'm going to put a little b-roll of the recent CLG bootcamp, but
Yes.
basically there's a lot of actions that goes on in a game like Melee or any other esport that requires a lot of finger or hand movement, and that can cause us to overuse these tendons. And specifically for this issue, it is, like Caitlin said, those tendons along the backside of your forearm and the backside of your hand. And while capacity or endurance is definitely a contributor, it doesn't mean that it's the biggest thing, right? There's all these other
Right.
things that we can look into. There's your mouse size, your grip type, how tight you grip your controller. That definitely contributes to it. If you grip it pretty tightly, you better believe you're going to be using your muscles a lot more on a for every action. And obviously, schedule is really important. How you position your wrists, all these things are contributing factors for how the tendon becomes damaged or irritated. And
Right.
I guess as a nice follow up to that, we can immediately get into how we would approach addressing that, right? If we know that mouse grip and posture and ergonomics and maybe our conditioning and even our scheduling affected, then how can we consider addressing this issue then?
All right, so let's dig into that a little bit more because, again, like we want to make it really clear that when we talk about a repetitive stress injury like this, the issue is that your body is inadequately prepared, inadequately adapted for the stresses you're placing on it. That doesn't mean that you're placing so much stress on it that it can never adapt. The same way that, like, the human body isn't designed to say, the human body isn't designed to pull a pickup truck by pulling it by things attached to ropes, but you can train in strongman competitions and learn how to do that. In the same way, just because your body isn't naturally adapted to being placed under these particular stresses doesn't mean you can't train yourself up for those stresses. So yes, looking at kind of the whole environment, looking at your positioning and your posture, looking at your controller grip, looking at your scheduling, your rest, what you do during your rest, things like that. But then digging in a little bit more specifically, we want to get into two categories of what to do about this. We want to get into prevention and we want to get into management. Matt, you want to call dibs on prevention or management? I'll take the other one.
Yeah, sure. We can start with prevention,
All
and
right.
basically, it's as I've said pretty frequently in a lot of my past pieces of content. Right, there's the big three. We have conditioning of our wrist and hand, or the muscles that we utilize a lot. In this case, it is the extensor digitorum and the extensor indicis. So, like Kaylin said, it's a muscle that brings our wrists up and brings our fingers up, as well as brings our index finger up away, right? And if you guys can imagine holding a GameCube controller, every single time I'm pressing L, or L, that's my left hand, I guess, or relative to you guys, it is right. So L here, and then R here, I'm lifting up my finger. Same thing. Um, every single time I'm pressing the A or C stick button pretty vigorously, and my wrist has to stabilize the movement of the controller, you better believe these forearm muscles are going to be activating, right? And when I say conditioning, that means that, hey, are you doing things on a regular basis to build up what we always say is your health bar to handle the, let's say, 4 hours of melee or net play or 3 hours of net play every single day? And the things that we do to address that are a lot of the videos that I've posted. Here's an example of, right, some of the eccentric exercises that you guys can do to build up your tissue's capacity. So we'll definitely link the video in the description, but this is one example, right? Or you can do stretches after you guys are done
Mm-hmm.
your actual gameplay to, and what we say is when you stretch, you are helping to recover your HP, right? Every single time you're pressing a button or lifting your index finger up to press your L, you're losing 2 to 3 points of HP. After you're done maybe 1 hour of playing, if you perform one of these stretches, you gain back some of this HP because you're allowing some of the stiffness that occurs over repeated stress on the muscle to relax and recover. And that's why we always pitch and say, hey, do some stretches or even a few quick movements after some of your games or during your breaks, because that allows you guys to have this period of recovery. And I guess in addition to that, there are even things like, well, actually, we'll save that. We'll save this really cool B-roll for later. But
Yeah.
is there anything else besides maybe exercise that you would do for prevention?
Definitely for prevention, I'd look at what's going on with kind of where I am and where I'm sitting. And that can definitely vary. You know, if you're at a tournament, you're not necessarily on your setup, but there's a world of difference in the amount of strain you're placing on your forearms in particular between sitting up, arms supported, not leaning your weight on arms, and leaning forward, elbows on your thighs, body weight pushing through your forearms. because you're asking your arms then to not only act as a stable base for your hands and fingers, but also to support your body weight. And that's the big ask. The more you can sit back and support your arms, the less those forearms have to do to stabilize your body weight, meaning that those muscles are only being asked to do stability and mobility of the arm itself, not being responsible for the rest of the body. Looking at scheduling when it comes to training as well. And that's both like on a micro and a macro level. So looking at what you're doing in one individual practice session. Are you warming up? Are you taking breaks? When you take your breaks, what do you do during them? Do you stretch? Do you do exercises? Do you get up and move around? Do you get some water? All of those things also build your HP bar back up, right? You're depleting yourself while you work. You are wearing out your muscles, and it's really small amounts of recovery that is required. Like if you get up every 30 minutes, all you need to do is move for 2 minutes. If you get up every hour, move for 5 minutes. If you're going every 90 minutes, move for 5 minutes. You don't need to like take a half-hour long rest break. You can, there's nothing wrong with it. But like you don't have to do major interruptions. Matt's running away apparently. Oh, Matt's stretching. Matt is exercising for me. That's what.
Boom. I was doing it. Doing the recommendation during.
You're doing the recommendations. I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
But you can also look at on a more macro level. So looking at how is my training scheduled out leading up to an event. So like the CLG bootcamp, for example, you'll notice that they started that not the beginning of like, not today, not, 2 days out from Genesis. They started that last week. They started that so that they'd have a period of winding down and recovery immediately leading up to a tournament, right? You don't do your hardest work right before you play in the big game. You do your hardest work the week before, and then you build back down.
Exactly.
And apparently my cat wants to be on stream. Hello, cat. Everyone can see my cat showing you how often you should move.
Let's re-emphasize that.
Yes, let's re-emphasize for that because I got distracted by my cat. I'm sorry. So when you're scheduling, your scheduling should be both macro and micro. Macro scheduling, you should have a recovery period, kind of calming down days. We call it a taper in running before you play in a big tournament. On a micro level, you should be taking breaks, either 2 minutes for every 30 minutes, 5 minutes for every hour. 5 minutes for every hour. 5 minutes for every 90 minutes, also okay.
Yeah.
You can, as well, in addition to this, good Lord, that elbow hyperextension, Matt. In addition to the exercises that Matt showed, you can also bias those wrist stretches, the ones that he showed like this and like this, specifically for fingers that are having issues, right? Like say my strain is greatest across my thumb because, hey, that's where most of my inputs are. So rather than just doing my stretch with my hand like this, I can bias it by gripping my thumb and specifically pulling on my thumb while I'm also stretching my wrist.
Yeah.
I can do this for any other finger as well. I can do this for index finger. I'm sure this is going to get clipped. I can absolutely do this for middle finger.
Yeah.
I can do this for ring finger. And we can also do this in the opposite direction. We can do it to stretch that back of the hand, the stuff that's doing the gripping, those extensor muscles that we just talked about.
Exactly. So that direction, what Caleb's doing right now is what you guys should do if you guys have pain with fox fingers. Okay, so again, we want to keep emphasizing throughout this entire session in that, hey, it's these guys that are being overused, these fingers, and to strengthen them, you want to do exercises that go in that motion, right? So if you have like a TheraBand and you want to strengthen these muscles, you provide some resistance downward, you bring your wrist up. Or if you have a rubber band, you can do this. You get a little rubber band and you open your fingers up, because then you can see when I'm opening my fingers up that those tendons are showing, right? Mm-hmm. And hey, if I don't need to wrap the rubber band around all my fingers, just the main index and middle, because those are the ones that are used more commonly when we're holding the gaming controller. So boom, I can just make this little pizza with the rubber band. And you can do those consistently aside from when you would play. So that's something really important when we prescribe in exercises. We're not trying to fatigue your muscles right before you play. We don't want to do it in between your sessions. When you're doing wrist conditioning or strengthening exercises, treat it like a workout. I'm gonna
Yeah.
go and I'm gonna do it in the morning, or I'm gonna do it aside from when I'm gonna play, but I'm not gonna do it within the 1 to 2 hour window periphery to fatigue those muscles. So that's important. Again, you can do wrist extensions, you can do finger extensions, open and closes, you can do dumbbell extensions, TheraBand extensions. The rubber band is one of the easiest hacks for strengthening your forearms because you can add more to add tension. You can really self progress pretty quickly with it.
Yeah.
And
And if you're finding that doing exercises with the rubber band is causing you pain, which might happen, it might be that moving through that kind of range of motion here is painful. You can even back it up a further step and go no equipment and do what's called an isometric exercise. Isometric exercise means your muscle is contracting, but you're not moving anywhere. So normally finger extension would look like this, right? My finger is coming up, it's extending. I don't know if it's your me, you're hyperextending. But if I wanted to resist that exercise, put 2 fingers on top. I'm not going anywhere. I'm trying to move upward, but my finger isn't moving. I'm going to hold this for 10 seconds. And then relax. If that's painful, if it feels like you're hyperextending here at this knuckle, you can also do this with a bent finger instead and just push up from here. You're not going to need much force to resist it. And although I'm holding my hand up to demonstrate, because that's where my webcam is, you should be doing this with your forearm supported on something. Do that 10 times, 10 seconds to start out, building yourself up to 20 times for 15 seconds. Once that's no longer painful to do, then absolutely great time to start progressing to some of those exercises that Matt's been talking about, the moving through the range of motion. There's other stuff that you could also do to manage this pain if it's already started to happen for you. Matt, do you want to cue up the massaging video?
It's ready whenever you talk about it.
Excellent. Go for it. Because self-massage is super useful for increasing blood flow, relaxing muscles, providing deep pressure sensory input. That deep pressure part is really important because when you have an injury that becomes chronic, that lasts over time, the nerve receptors around that area actually become more sensitive to painful stimuli, to nociceptive stimuli. So providing a really drastically different stimulus like deep pressure helps to change that sensitivity. You can also do a slightly more uncomfortable version of massage called cross friction, which is what it sounds like. You're moving across, you're generating friction, moving across the tendon, which is right here in the middle of my wrist. Moving across for about 1 to 2 minutes. It's going to be mildly irritating at first, and then it'll have a kind of numbing effect. That can be useful to do before you start doing exercises.
Yes.
We did have a question in chat about stretches, which gave me the great opportunity to segue into this. When you're doing these stretches, they should not be painful. On different days, your body is going to have different degrees of range of motion. And even at different times of the day, you're going to have different degrees of range of motion. When you first wake up, you are stiffer than you are, say, in the middle of the day when your body temperature is the highest and you've been moving around a while. When you're stretching, if you're feeling pain, consider 2 important things. Am I pushing my body too far? That is, am I trying to push to the absolute end of range of motion I've previously had rather than what my body is telling me I have today? Or are you stretching in a bad or incorrect position? Are you stretching in a position that causes 2 joints to come really close together into each other and impinge something, pinch something between them? Are you stretching in a way that requires something further up the chain, elbow or shoulder, to be in an awkward or unusual position? If you are, reset your position and recheck how far am I pushing myself. We should note that with a chronic tendon issue like this one, you're kind of in it for the long haul when it comes to management. Tendon issues take a while to heal because that's just how fast tendons heal. Different tissues have different healing rates. Tendons take a long time, and you're looking at like 3 to 4 months for full resolution. That doesn't mean you won't start to see improvement sooner. You will definitely see improvement sooner, but 3 to 4 months is when we'd really expect things to be getting close to baseline.
Right.
So if, for example, while you're doing exercises, you're having 3 out of 10 pain, like I could probably follow people with this pain, but I really don't like it very much. 3 out of 10 pain is kind of our good benchmark for if my pain stays at this level while I'm exercising, I don't enjoy it, but it's okay. I'm not making my injury worse. If, however, you're doing an exercise and it worsens your pain, it's consistently getting you up and above that 3 out of 10 level, then we think maybe I back off. Maybe I go back from these exercises to my isometric exercises instead, let that pain come back down, and then build back up again. Exactly. It's a slow and gradual and over time progression. It's not quite as linear as people would hope for, and it's not quite as quick as people would hope for. But doing this kind of slow and steady progression of isometric exercises, then into eccentric and concentric exercises, including the stretches within your available range of motion on any given day. And last but not least, doing mobilization, both of the tendons and of the wrist itself, can be really helpful for improving the mobility here, which means less strain here. Matt, do you have that video of me doing the wrist mobilization?
I don't on cue.
That's okay. I can show it right here. Yes. Well, I'm going to show a modified version of it right here. So imagine my hand's resting on a table. And I want to move this region of my wrist. I want to make it move more. My hand is going to be firmly planted on the table. I'm going to take my opposite hand, cup it right against the bend of my wrist. I'm going to be pushing backwards, like I'm trying to push that way the whole time, but of course my arm's not moving. I'm just going to rock myself forward into a more bent position. So as my right arm rocks forward, that position that my left hand is in is pushing the wrist back. So I'm pushing my wrist into more extension. I'm opening up extension of the wrist. It's not a hard push. It's not, you're not trying to dislocate your wrist. It's just helping to provide a little bit of movement across what we call the carpal bones here. These are your intercarpals. They move on each other. There's 2 different rows. They have a very inappropriate acronym to remember them. And we want them to move enough that your hands are very mobile. If that's uncomfortable or difficult for you to do, you can also interclasp your hands. Yep. Do circles, infinity signs, draw some alphabets if you really want to. I like infinity signs best. It's easiest. You can also mobilize not only your wrist, but also the tendons in the back of your hand with what really kind of looks like voguing. Matt, you want to do some voguing with me? Yep, pretty much. So going from straight to tabletop. No, bring your vogue back down. Calm your vogue. Calm your pants.
You want to go hard through on the vogue.
Straight, tabletop, fist, hook, crunch it in. Hold each position for like 3 to 5 seconds. Nice and easy. Nothing crazy. Gentle, easy motion.
I want to touch back on the expected healing time that we were discussing earlier. So you had mentioned 3 to 4 months. I think that's the majority of more severe issues. And a lot of the times with gamers, it gets to that point when you guys are looking for some help, or you are looking for someone to help you address some of the pain. It's gotten to the point where it does need 3 to 4 months to actually see it fully resolved. But I think as our community is getting more and more health conscious, there's so many people now reaching out to me and saying, hey, how do I prevent this? I feel a little bit. And what's great is that the fastest healing times that they've found in research for tendon is actually 3 to 4 weeks. So what's also very interesting to identify too is a lot of the times we might think it is a strength or even endurance issue. But if it gets a lot better in the span of 1 to 2 weeks, we can actually say that it's more relevant that it's a coordination issue.
Yep.
Meaning that we're able to better control our muscles because this is an example I always like to give. Imagine the muscles here, the fox finger muscles. There's 100 fibers as represented by these 4 fingers. Okay, if we have pain and we have discomfort and we're dealing with it, we're only maybe able to activate or utilize 2 of the fingers, which represents 50 muscle fibers. But as we do isometric exercises, strengthening exercises, endurance exercises, we might not actually be changing the tissue capacity, but we're increasing the amount of motor units that we recruit so that, boom, we get all 100 muscle fibers that we can use. And that means that, guess what? Hey, if we can use all 100 to manage the 4 hours, it's much better than 50% managing the 4 hours of playing. So just realize that it's different for everyone. Everyone's issue might be slightly different. So just the bottom line is you have to be consistent for at least
Right.
2 weeks with exercise. Try it. Do not give up. Even if it might be worse a little bit in the beginning, a lot of times it's because we're more aggressive in the beginning with our exercises and then we overload our tendons. So of course
Right.
it's going to be a little more painful in the beginning.
Right.
But just be mindful that
Mhm.
pain management, recovery takes patience. It takes consistency. Just like if we want to improve in any game, it takes
Right.
work.
Right. Like I wouldn't expect, to start playing Apex tomorrow and by the end of the week, be great with my aim. I'd expect that it would take me
Unless
days,
you do aim
weeks of
training.
practice to be getting to the kind of level where I'm super competitive. Um, Look, all of my teenage patients tell me the cool kids play Apex now, or at least jump back and forth between Apex and Fortnite. Thank you very much. I'm hip with the
What about
youth.
Tarkov though? Tarkov is supposed to be popping off.
Tarkov is popping off, although I'm like mildly irritated that they don't have any female soldiers in
They
it.
should. Bastards.
Totally should. I'm a badass, just saying. Uh, no, but like, so I wouldn't expect to jump into any FPS that I'm unfamiliar with just because I have a little bit of experience and suddenly be really great at it. I'd expect it would take me time and work and effort, and I wouldn't quit the game just because I'm not good the first day I play it. Same thing goes with tendon and injury recovery. Um, I should not expect that this is going to be fixed today or tomorrow. I should not expect that just because I worked out one day means I'm going to lose 5 pounds the next. I should expect that this is going to take me time and consistent work.
Exactly.
But that's right too. That the 3 to 4 month kind of end timeline that I talked about, that's for really chronic tendon issues that do have not only coordination but also strength and endurance deficits. Whereas if you're catching this early, if you're paying attention and listening to your body, then absolutely you can expect to see improvement to full resolution so much sooner.
Yes, exactly. So, overall, what we went over today was fox fingers, okay? And it is a tendon and muscle issue of the forearm and hand. And it's caused because we tend to overuse them based on too much playing. We have weak or poor endurance for our muscles, and maybe sometimes our posture is affected. And the things that you guys can do to address that, you do exercises. You fix your posture and your ergonomics, and then you optimize your schedule. And then lastly, the secret tip is you be patient because it takes time. I want to thank obviously everyone that is here, still here, listening to us chat. I actually kind of want to open up this last